That's okay, you can still kind of see us. Anyways, hello and welcome. We really appreciate you all being here, and I'm just going to introduce us all, and then the way it's going to work is that I'm going to kind of open this up and talk for about 15 minutes about some more foundational skills that I think are really important for every parent if you're raising a child. And then Brianna's going to talk about raising a child with anxiety. And Jennifer's going to talk about raising a child with attentional difficulties. And then Kristen's going to talk about raising a child who's had some traumas. And I think the reason I'm specifically not calling them disorders is because you don't have to have a diagnosis to benefit from everything that we are going to share with you tonight. It is just chocked full of information, so try to take it all in. The good news is you don't have to take a lot of notes because they're recording it, and it's going to go up in your school's portal, so if you want to go back and listen to one of these. I forward these talks to clients and to colleagues all the time because there's just such great information. So you all may wonder, well, no, I first have to introduce us. So I'm Kimberly Morrow, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Let me go to a picture of us. And so I've been specializing in treating anxiety disorders and OCD for, I don't even know, what does it say on there? It probably doesn't, but like, let's say 35 years, so a very long time. I'm absolutely passionate about helping people live well with anxiety. And I see clients 3 days a week, and then I actually train clinicians to do this work, because I figure the more clinicians I train, the more people who are going to be able to live well with anxiety. So I'm really passionate about what I do. And Brianna is a new clinician, and she is in our office now, which is super exciting, because if you haven't figured it out, we have the same last name. So she's my daughter, and as we were driving here together, I said, did you ever think that we would be doing this? Because she went to college to play the violin. How she's up on stage, I'm not really sure how we got from there to here, but she did a lot of hard work, and she is a natural at it, and as Steve attested to, she's just fantastic working with children with anxiety and OCD, and you'll hear more about all of her tips and tricks in just a little bit. And then Jennifer works with kids, teens, and adults with anxiety, OCD, and ADHD, and she really is fantastic at working with attentional difficulties, and she will tell you more about how to help your children get their executive functioning skills working, and she'll give you lots of hacks around that as well. And then Kristen specializes in working with kids, teens, and adults with anxiety, OCD, and trauma. And so she has a lot of great information to share around that, and we all have difficulties in life and go through really, really hard places, so you don't have to have post-traumatic stress disorder to benefit from all the things that she's going to share with you. So that is our group, and I'm going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes here, and then I'm going to pass it on to Brianna, and each one is going to talk about a specific topic, and we'll give you time to ask that person questions, but then at the end I'll facilitate 10 minutes or so of discussion once you've kind of integrated everything that we have shared with you. So just know there will be lots of opportunities to ask questions if you have questions, okay? Okay, so back to our candy. I love to give people experiences when I talk, because I think the more you have an experience with it, the more you might understand what your child's going through, or maybe what even you're going through. So if you wouldn't mind, open up your candy, and I like full participation. So if we could just all pop it in our mouth, and while you're sucking on it, I want you to think about, what does this have to do with helping your child live well with their mental health? So let's go ahead and pop it in and think about it for a second. We have one person choking. Raise your hand if you need help. It's fairly awful, right? All right, while you're trying to get through it, and I really encourage you to stay with it because there's a lesson in it. But what do you think this has to do with helping your child through big emotions or difficult things in life? Yes? That's all you can think about. Oh, I don't know that anybody, I don't even know, done hundreds and hundreds of training. I don't think anyone ever came up with that. Yeah, that is really true. Yeah. But even when you think of painful things, sometimes everything, you're not paying attention to anything else that's going on, but just getting through the really difficult sensation, right? Yeah, someone else raised their hand? Yes. It eventually passes. Put a pin in that. Yes, such an important thing for all of you to know, that feelings and thoughts pass on their own if we do nothing, okay? Anything else? Anybody keep on sucking on it? What's happening? It's getting sweeter. So I want to make sure that you all understand about the sweet spot, and that is that the sweet spot doesn't say that if your kids do hard things or they learn to tolerate hard feelings, that everything will be good. Because as we know as humans, that isn't true, right? But what do you think happens when kids learn that they can handle hard things and they can be with big feelings and not try to get away from them? What do you think happens to the child? They build a higher threshold? Yes, they literally increase their ability to tolerate difficult things. And how do you think they feel about themselves? Yes, yes. They become more confident, and that's what my next 10 minutes is going to be about as we talk about some kind of basic skills and ideas about how to help your children. So the three great untruths. This came from a great book. Anybody read The Coddling of the American Mind? Or the Jonathan Haidt's, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, Haidt. He has a newer book out called The Anxious Generation. Anyone hear about that? Super, super popular book. But anyways, I don't have time to tell you all about, but these are two professors that went about trying to understand why are we in this current mental health crisis with teens and young adults? Why can they not seem to handle hard things? And they did a lot of research, and then they came to some understandings. And this is just one piece of it, but I think it's really important. And the three great untruths starts with the untruth of fragility. And that untruth is that I can't handle doing hard things. So this is what you might believe, but it's what a lot of our children believe, okay? And the truth is that we are capable of handling hard things, but we have to do hard things to learn that. So as parents, when we are trying to get kids out of feeling bad or find a way to help them with something, we're not teaching them that they can do hard things, that they can problem solve, that they can feel really, really anxious feelings. I'm literally thinking of a person that I was just meeting with before I came here. This is an 18-year-old who is about to go leave. She's graduating this year and going to go to Texas for college. And she has tremendous anxiety, and her dad has tremendous anxiety. And every time that she thinks about it and feels like she's panicking, she is in the habit of texting her mom, and then her mom is in the habit of showing her all the ways that she is a terrific person who's confident and she's going to do great and she doesn't really need to worry about this. Or she gets her, something that's going to make her, a warm drink to feel better in the middle of the winter. But her mom is in this role of helping her feel better. Her dad actually gets really irritable when he gets anxious, so when he even thinks about her going away to college, he just gets mad, and he doesn't see why she needs to do that, and he gives her all the reasons why she might not be successful and things that she might not have thought about to worry about, because that's what his anxious brain is doing. And it really has created a huge conundrum for her. But one of the first things that we had to work on was her not texting her mom for help when she felt anxious, and trusting, just the way someone said here tonight, that when anxiety shows up, it will pass on its own, and that she can do hard things with anxiety. So her going away to college, which is something she values, no one's making her go away to college. She wants to do this. And her anxious brain and her dad's anxious brain are trying to convince her not to do it, okay? But we really want to help kids do hard things by getting them in the habit of doing them. There's this great workshop that Brianna and I went to at the Anxiety Disorders Conference a year or two ago, and it was a study that they did on kids becoming independent. And what they did was they took a group of kids who had anxiety disorders, and instead of doing therapy to help them face their fears, what they did was they had them make a list of things that they would love to do without their parents, but they didn't think their parents would let them. And this was Manhattan, by the way, that they did this study. So it was like riding the subway by themselves, or walking to their friend's house, or doing all kinds of things that were independent. And then every week, the parents would agree to one thing, the therapist helped them figure out how it was going to happen, and the child had to do it on their own. So when they were done, let's say this went on for 6 or 8 weeks, what do you think happened to this child and this family after 6 or 8 weeks of practicing doing things on their own without their parents, and things that were a bit risky? They literally had to have some risk in them in order for them to be able to put them on the list. Any ideas of what happened? Yeah, what do you think? They gained confidence. Yep. Yes, you guys are good. You want to come up here with us? We'll just all give this talk. Yes, they got better at coping with unfamiliar situations. They were building their I can handle it muscle, and they didn't have the parent and the phone to text, I don't know what to do. They had to problem solve. They had to figure it out. Did they get anxious? Of course they got anxious. But what do you think happened at the end of the study? Do you think they still qualified for the diagnosis of an anxiety disorder? No. They learned how to tolerate anxiety, and that it would pass on its own if they just kept going. Such important information, okay? So then we have the untruth of emotional reasoning. I feel it, so I should respond to it. The truth is feelings pass, that's what we're talking about. Feelings pass on their own if we do nothing, and we keep doing things that we value. So I had another client who was in 6th grade. She's a single child of a single parent. And the mother is also in therapy, and really she had an opportunity that she wanted to take, which connected to her values. She got the offer to go with a friend to Italy, which meant she had to leave her daughter home with her mother. So the daughter was going to stay with her grandmother. And the daughter developed all kinds of anxiety. And the mother thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, right? Do you see how just automatic it is? That we listen to our kids' amygdala, which Brianna's going to talk to you about, and it's like, oh no, I have to make sure that my daughter doesn't feel bad. And my daughter's like, you can't go because I'm going to feel bad. But the daughter was able to do some work with me. And what she came to the conclusion was that this is literally her words, I can handle feeling sad and missing my mom, and still have some fun while she is gone. Like, what a beautiful statement, right? So she's holding both things at the same time. It's okay that I feel sad. I'm going to miss my mom. So we're not trying to get her away from that feeling. We're trying to help her feel that feeling, honor it, and be open to the possibility of some fun experiences happening while her mom was gone. And then the next one is the untruth of us versus them. If we don't agree, they are wrong. Boy, oh boy, are we in the middle of that right now, right? The truth is that psychological flexibility, our ability to be with a wide range of emotions, our ability to hear other people's opinions, our ability to be with somebody and not agree with them, is really important in order to live well with anxiety and any other distressing situation. So anything as parents that you can do to help them. I had parents bring in a 12-year-old child, and one of the parents' goals was for me to teach the child to be more respectful of them. And I said, well, what does that look like? What do you mean by that? And they said, well, she's been disagreeing with us, and we feel that that's disrespectful. So we want you to talk to her about being respectful, which means agreeing with us, right? Well, she's 12 years old. If any of you have 12 years old or teenagers, you know that that's the time where they start to develop a sense of themselves, where they get to begin to explore in their own ways of thinking and being in this world. It's such an important developmental period. And so I said to the parents, I can't help you with that goal, but what I can help with is that all of you learn how to communicate and disagree with each other and respect each other. Now that skill she can take into the rest of her life, okay? So is this all making sense, these kind of basic ideas? Okay, so how do you help your child with emotional regulation? Let's just quickly talk about the do's and don'ts, and I'll hand it over to Brianna. You do want to identify and validate their feelings. So if you have a child who's feeling anxious, you don't want to talk about, oh, honey, what caused you to feel anxious? That may sound weird, like you'd think, well, why wouldn't you want to do that? Because I call that life. right? Life makes me anxious, and I'm an anxious person, so I can promise you that's true. So it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the child's able to identify, oh, this is what anxiety feels like, okay? So you want to help them identify that and just validate, yeah, sometimes anxiety feels really bad. When I get anxiety, I have to pee and poop a lot. Or when I get anxiety, I feel like my heart is beating so fast, okay? And so you're just validating and you're sitting with them around that, okay? You want to ask for more information. Tell me more about what anxiety feels like to you. You don't necessarily need to talk about the content of their fears as much as you want to just help them be curious and hold space for the feeling that they're having until it passes, okay? And then you just want to listen. You don't want to problem solve. You just want to be able to listen. And that's it. The rest of it, they will understand on their own, that it helps to just talk about it. It helps to be curious about it. And then you're able to get on with your day, okay? What you don't want to do is you don't want to make them happy by telling them what they should be happy about. So if a child says to you, oh my gosh, you never let me have a sleepover. And you say to them, well, you should just be happy that you have a bed to sleep in. Or I let you have a sleepover twice this month. You know, why can't you be happy about that? That's like a really automatic response from us parents, right? And I'll own my own struggles with this. How we want to be able to say is just like, oh, you're really feeling disappointed, aren't you? I'm labeling the feeling and I'm validating it. I would be feeling disappointed too if I were you. That's a hard feeling to have. But I'm confident that you can feel that and we can get through this. Notice I'm not having a conversation about sleepovers. I'm just talking about feelings, okay? Don't try to solve their problem and don't try to compare their experiences with others. So you might also have a child that comes around and says, I'm the only one that didn't do well on the math test. You might be tempted to say something like, oh, honey, I know other kids didn't do well on that math test either. That was a hard math test. That seems very validating. And again, there isn't necessarily anything wrong with it, but the unconscious message you're giving your children is, I can't handle your feelings either. I have to get out of this yucky experience of you suffering. And so we really want to be able to say to kids, tell me what it's like for you to have not done well on your math test. Or tell me what that feels like. Or that really sucks. I'm sorry that happened. What's the next thing that you've got today? Oh yeah, you've got soccer practice tonight. Let's get ready for soccer practice. You're going to feel yucky for a little while, but it'll pass at some point, and maybe you'll let me know. But like at some point you'll be like, hey mom, I don't feel that yucky feeling anymore. And you're like, isn't that interesting how that happens? So you validate, you help them identify the feeling, and you help them move on in their day, okay? So do you have any questions for me before I hand it over to Brianna to talk to you about anxiety? All that's making sense. Okay, Brianna.
All right, hi everybody. So today I'm going to talk about anxiety and some parenting skills that you can use with yourselves, but also with your anxious kiddos. And, you know, we've all experienced anxiety. We know what that feels like. And I think it's really important for our kids to understand why we have anxiety and why anxiety is actually a really important emotion that we all have. I have a lot of kids come into my office and talk about how awful anxiety feels, and it does. None of us enjoy having anxiety, but they want it gone. They say, how do I get rid of this? I don't want to feel this anymore. And it's my job to help them understand that we need anxiety, but I can help them control their anxiety. I can help them respond in a different way when they're feeling anxious. So one of my favorite ways to really explain anxiety to kids is with Inside Out 2. An amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. But in that movie, there's a lot of different feelings characters, and they introduce anxiety and fear. And they introduce fear as being afraid of the things that we can see, problems in our present moment. Whereas anxiety is afraid of things that she can't see, all of the what-ifs that her imagination can come up with. But the key part is both anxiety and fear have the same goal of trying to keep the main character, Riley, safe. They're both trying their best to help out their human. And The part that kind of gets a little wonky is when anxiety is trying to solve all these problems that haven't even happened yet, and it's interfering with our day-to-day life. So, let me go on to the next one. There we go. So just to give you guys a little bit more information about how anxiety is affecting our brain. So our anxiety is caused by the amygdala, which is a really small part of our brain right in the middle. It's actually only the size of an almond. And sometimes just that fact alone really empowers kids. Oh, my anxiety is that small. I can easily handle this. I can now take control. So I think that's just a little fun fact to be sharing with kids. But our amygdala is one of the oldest parts of our brain, and it's wired to keep us safe. So it's always looking out for us, and it's trying to sense if we're in danger. And if it senses danger, then it's going to alert us, and it's going to send chemicals like adrenaline rushing through our body, and that's what's causing all these really uncomfortable sensations, like our heart pounding, us needing to go to the bathroom a lot, us feeling hot, and it might be really hard in those moments for us to think and concentrate. And that's because our amygdala is so focused on keeping us safe. It's telling other parts of our brain, like the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of our brain, I don't need you right now. I need to focus on staying safe. What's important right now is me preparing to run away or fight the danger or freeze or however I can stay safe in this moment. So that's another important thing for you all to know as parents, is that when your child is really heightened and feeling anxious, trying to talk them through it is not going to work in that moment because their logical part of their brain is not engaged. So nothing's getting through, and they're just reacting in those moments. So we really need to wait until they've regulated and they've calmed down to have any important conversations that need to be had in those moments. So one way that I like to help kids understand if what they're experiencing is fear, like an actual problem in the present moment, or anxiety, all those what-ifs in their head, is by getting them grounded back into the present moment. And we're doing that by using our 5 senses and our common sense. And most commonly, we're using our sight, our touch, and our hearing. So, for example, if, I'm giving this presentation right now and the fire alarm starts to go off, we're going to hear the fire alarm, we're going to see it flashing, maybe we'll start to smell smoke. Those are all cues that we are actually potentially in danger and we need to keep ourselves safe. So we have present moment data telling us that there's a problem to solve. But if I'm falling asleep tonight and my brain says, what if there's a fire while you're sleeping? And I start to get all anxious about that and I'm trying to plan my exit routes. There isn't any present moment information telling me that I'm in danger. There's no fire alarm going off, I'm not seeing any fire, I'm not smelling any smoke. All I'm doing is preventing myself from sleeping. So that can just be a nice tool to use to help your kiddos understand, is there something that I can solve right now? And if there is, great, let's try and figure it out. But if there isn't, that's my anxiety, and I need to use other skills to face it, feel it, and be in control of it. So one skill that all of you can use as parents are called supportive statements. And supportive statements is how I want you all to start responding to your kiddos when they're feeling anxious. And supportive statements have 2 really important parts. The first part is accepting and validating their feelings, just like Kimberly was saying. So I know this is really hard for you, you're feeling really anxious right now, whatever that feeling is for them. And then the second part is giving them the confidence that they can handle those big feelings. So I see that this is hard for you, but I'm 100% certain that you can handle it. Or I know you're feeling really anxious right now, but I know you can get through this. So parents and caregivers are mirrors to their kids. And if a kid sees that their parent thinks that they can't handle it, they're going to start to believe that too. So our goal in using these statements is to gradually and indirectly change your child's relationship with their own anxiety. And parents tend to fall into 2 different categories when they're responding to their child's anxiety. And it's just important to kind of think about how you're responding so that we can start shifting it to more of the supportive statements. But those 2 categories are overprotecting and overdemanding. So examples of overprotecting would be, it's my job to protect him from anxiety. This is too much. I don't think she can handle it. And going into the reassurance, it's going to be okay, it's fine, it's not that big of a deal. So when parents are overprotecting, we're teaching our children that they're not able to handle anxiety or distress, which then causes an over-reliance on you as parents to handle their anxiety and distress. So what we're wanting to do is to help them handle these feelings and be confident in their ability to handle these feelings on their own. Examples of being over-demanding would be statements like, it's not that scary, or just get over it, let's get on with our day. But when parents are over demanding, they're not validating their child's emotions and their experiences. And what tends to happen is that children are going to act out and they're going to have tantrums to be heard. If you don't think that this is scary, let me show you how scary this is, and I'm going to throw a big tantrum. So that's where we're trying to meet in the middle with the supportive statements by really validating how hard this is for them, and that we're asking them to do really hard things, but giving them the confidence that we know that they can do this hard thing. So again, we're trying to give them confidence in their ability to tolerate the emotional experiences of being anxious. And like we've been saying, our goal is not to prevent our children from feeling anxious, but we're hoping that through these repeated messages of support, that the child will start to think of themselves as capable. And the next time that they're feeling nervous or anxious, instead of thinking, oh, I don't know if I can handle this, where's my mom, I need her to do this thing, they're gonna start thinking, okay, I'm feeling anxious, but I know I can handle this. So I can think of one child who really understood how reassurance from her teacher was affecting her. And this is a kiddo that I was working with that was school refusal. She made it through halfway through her second grade year and she stopped going. And her big fear was that her parents weren't going to pick her up. And as is common with anxiety, this wasn't a real fear. Her parents were very timely, they always picked her up. It was just all these what ifs in her head, right? And what she told me was that her really well-meaning teacher would do a lot of reassurance. She would go over the pickup plan multiple times with her. She said, you know, I know your parents, I know they're gonna pick you up. It's not gonna be that big of a deal. I know that they're gonna be here. And what she told me is when she would have these conversations with her teacher, her anxiety would just grow. And it would give her anxiety fuel of, well, if my teacher says that she's gonna pick me up, let me think of all these reasons where maybe she won't pick me up. So the teacher was unintentionally engaging with the content of the anxiety, which therefore was growing her anxiety. And what I love is what she said to me. We were starting to get her back into school, and she said, you know what, maybe I can have a conversation with my teacher and I can teach her some of these brave statements, which is what I call them with kids. So she was ready to get her teacher educated, which I loved. So another important thing to recognize when we're dealing with our children that have anxiety is how are we accommodating their anxiety? And accommodating a child in distress is a really natural thing to do as parents. And, you know, almost all parents accommodate, and we accommodate because, you know, we want our children to be okay. We want them to feel better in that moment. And another reason we sometimes accommodate is we gotta get to work. We gotta get on with our day, so let me just do this thing real quick to get her moving. And, you know, in the moment, it does solve the problem, right? We're able to move on with our day. But what we've just taught our child is that they can't handle that distressing moment. They can't handle the stressor because all we did was take it away. So what we're trying to do is help our child learn that they can deal with this hard thing in front of them. Because every time we accommodate, both the child and the parents become more reliant on the accommodation. The child learns that, you know, each time the situation appears, and it's always going to occur again in some way, the child's going to ask for the accommodation because that's how they got through that situation last time, and the parent's more likely to give it because the child's asking for it, and, you know, we're stressed again, we just got to move on through our day. So this is going to lead to the maintenance of your child's anxiety over time and potentially even more symptoms. So although accommodation is usually really well intended, by accommodating, we're really depriving our children from opportunities to learn that they can cope with more distress than they originally thought. So if we look at this accommodation cycle up here, what tends to happen is there's some sort of distress related to the disorder. So for example, a kiddo might say, I'm too scared to go alone to get my backpack. So there's some sort of family accommodation. The parents go with the child to get their backpack. And there is that short-term reduction in distress. The child gets his backpack, he gets to school on time, you guys get to work on time, life is great in that moment. But what just happened is the child learned to have continued dependence on the parents for regulation. So the child now thinks the only way I can get things from another room is if my parent comes with me. That then leads to the maintenance of symptoms. So the parents continue to accommodate and the child continues to ask for accommodation and continues to avoid. So what I'm asking all of you to do is think about how am I accommodating my child when it comes to their anxiety specifically. I know, like Jen's going to talk about ADHD and accommodations that kids might actually need. And your children might have, you know, different things going on where they truly do need an accommodation. But when it comes to anxiety, accommodations are only growing the anxiety. And we're also not pulling things away cold turkey. I'm not asking you guys to, just completely stop doing whatever you've been doing to your child, with your child for a very long time, but thinking about how can I, in a step-by-step approach, start to remove myself so my child starts gaining the confidence to handle this and do this on their own. So, for example, if a child's refusing to go to school, most of the time, if they've been struggling with this for a while, we're not just going to drop them off because they're going to have a huge tantrum. They're not going to go. It's going to be a big mess. But what we can do is see if there's a favorite teacher, or is there a friend that can come meet them at the front door and walk them in the first couple times the first week. Maybe the parent does sit in the parking lot for a little while, and even though this is still accommodating them, we are showing them that they can do hard things, and eventually we're trying to remove those accommodations as well. So another little client of mine that I had, she had just right OCD, and this really affected her routines with her parents. So everything had to happen in a certain order, just the right way, and if it didn't, then we had to start all over again. So it started taking up a lot of their day. And once I explained to the parents what accommodation was and how they were feeding their anxiety, they were able to realize how often they accommodated throughout their day. And they were able to explain to their child how the accommodation was actually growing this worry feeling that they had, and they slowly started removing themselves from her routine. And pretty quickly, she was able to realize that she could do these things on her own. And it's not going to happen that quickly or that easily for everybody, but if you can start to recognize what are some ways that I'm accommodating my child, and then slowly start to take a step back, your child's going to grow in confidence. So it's also really important to recognize that whatever we're giving our attention to grows. And this is definitely true for anxiety. And our brain is really wired to give attention to our anxiety because it thinks that we could be in danger. So of course we're going to try and problem solve, and we're going to seek reassurance. We're going to try and keep ourselves safe. So that's when we're coming back to, using our senses, grounding ourselves in the present moment. Am I actually in danger, or is this my anxiety? And if this is my anxiety, what are some ways that I'm giving it attention? Because if we're giving attention to our anxieties or to, negative possibilities throughout our day, that's what our brain is wired to look for. So it's going to start looking for things throughout our day, at school, wherever that is, that didn't go well, that grew our anxiety. But there's going to be plenty of things that happen throughout the day that actually did go really well, or were even just neutral. So if we can help our children start to pay attention to what's going on in the present moment and identifying, what went okay for me today? What was just neutral today, instead of really hyper-focusing on all of the negative possibilities that are out there. So my goal is to have my clients learn to let their thoughts, their worry thoughts, be in their awareness. We're not trying to push them away. We're not trying to get rid of them. We're letting them be there, but we're not giving them our full attention. So for another client that I had, he was really nervous about his mom going on an airplane because he thought planes were so dangerous. And if I would have let him, he would have happily spent the entire hour-long session telling me how dangerous planes were. Have you guys seen the news? There's been a lot of plane crashes, so they have to be dangerous, right? What if the plane crashes? What if my mom gets hurt? What if I'm not with her? And if I let him engage in that, you can see how that's just amping us up and growing our anxiety. So all of this conversation isn't helpful. And again, my goal isn't for him to block out these thoughts or to stop having these anxious thoughts, but my goal is for him to respond to them differently. So when a thought like that pops up, him saying instead, oh, here's my worry again, but I know I can handle it, and then giving his attention back to something that's more important in that present moment. Like, can he play a game with his sister, or is there homework that he needs to finish? But getting us back into the present moment is really important. Another thing that really needed to be worked on is how the parents were responding to all these comments about the anxiety about the flying. So this is where we went back to those supportive statements. So the first time he would make a comment, they would use a supportive statement like, I can tell you're really worried right now, but I also know that we can handle this moment. And if he made another comment, that's when we're going to start moving into some active ignoring. So we're labeling, oh, here's your anxiety, and I'm not going to grow your anxiety, so I'm not going to have that conversation with you. And then moving forward, if he chooses to keep making comments, that's when we're not talking about it anymore. We're done. But it's important for him and any kid to recognize we're not ignoring the child, we're ignoring the anxiety, we're ignoring the OCD because we don't want to grow it. So we're happy to go play a game with him, we're happy to go talk about something else, but when those comments about the flying and the anxiety start up again, that's your anxiety, we're not going to give that your attention. So, my hope is that all of you can start to just kind of think about what are some ways that I'm unintentionally growing my child's anxiety? Am I reassuring them? Am I accommodating them? Am I helping them give a lot of attention to it? And then slowly starting to use some of these skills, using those supportive statements, validating their feelings, giving the confidence to handle it, finding ways to slowly start removing accommodations, and then helping them give their attention back to the present moment where it belongs. And I also think it's really important that as adults, we're modeling all of this for them, because these are really hard things. So all of my clients know that I have social anxiety, and most of them know that I'm giving this presentation tonight, and that I get really anxious every time I go up to present. But they've heard time and time again that I don't let that stop me, because I value sharing this information with all of you. And it's really important for me to teach them that I'm doing what I'm asking them to do. I'm never going to ask them to do something that I'm not willing to do. So I really encourage all of you to start thinking about what are hard things that you're doing in your day? What are things that are brave that you're able to share with your child at the dinner table? So that way it's not, we just need to fix your anxiety. It's, no, look, this is really hard for me too. I get it, and this is the hard thing that I'm choosing to do. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Are there any questions for me specifically? Yes. Yeah, so just to make sure everyone heard her, what happens when it manifests physically? They're getting stomach aches, they're going to bed with stomach aches, they're waking up with stomach aches, and that's really common. I mean, I have a nervous stomach myself. And part of it is just helping them understand that this isn't a physical issue, this isn't a symptom that they're having, it's just a sensation related to their anxiety. And sensations aren't dangerous, but it's the story that we attach to them. So if they're thinking, oh, I don't want to go to school tomorrow, now I'm feeling anxious, now my stomach hurts, what if I throw up? Oh my gosh, if I threw up at school, that'd be so embarrassing, I could never do that. So now we're creating this huge anxiety loop that's just growing and growing and growing our anxiety. So the goal, again, is just to label it as anxiety, to really validate them, like, yeah, this really hurts and this is hard, but I know we can get through it anyways, and helping them identify, is there a story they're attaching to it? And if there is, how can we come back to the present moment instead of feeding that story? Does anyone else have?
You're doing such a great job. But I wanted to say two things. One to that is, and I just lost my thought about it. Back to accommodations, like sometimes if a child develops IBS, because anxiety disorders do dump a bunch of chemicals into your gut, so you are going to have stomach aches and headaches and feel like you're going to throw up and pee and poop a lot. So an accommodation that might be appropriate for that is that they get a free pass where anytime they have to use the bathroom, they get to leave the classroom to go to the bathroom until the therapist or you skill them up with understanding how to respond differently to anxiety, and that's going to help quiet the chemicals that are being dumped into their gut, and that's going to help improve them. But until they're better, then they might need the accommodation of being able to use whatever bathroom. But I would never keep a child home because they have a stomach ache and they have to pee and poop a lot, because that's just part of life, and if we keep them home, then they believe that it's dangerous and it might mean that they're sick or something. They're not. They're just getting a bunch of chemicals dumped into their gut. So that's one thing. And the only other thing I was just going to add to it was, when you start to remove your accommodations, make sure that you've sat down with your child when they're not anxious and you're not all struggling, just to explain the brain to them, to explain that now that you understand anxiety better and you understand what maintains it, and that you've been playing a role in that, and that you're sorry. And now that you know better, you want to do better. So it helps for you to take some responsibility for that and to help them understand why you're going to be changing that.
I also wanted to add, this is something that I'll talk a little bit about in a moment, but to kind of build off what they were sharing, the biggest challenge in situations like this is often that we as caretakers or parents or teachers or just, I mean, kind human beings don't want to see these little beings suffer, right? And so I would encourage you to remember that you sending your child to school with a stomach ache is not negating what they're experiencing, but to maybe really encourage yourself and ask for support and help, that sometimes parenting or caretaking of kids means we have to do really hard things. So we're gonna have to sit through our own discomfort or our own fears or our own traumas and say, oh wait, I'm not gonna allow you to essentially put your hand on the hot stove because I'm afraid that you're gonna not feel, that you're gonna feel unsupported. And that goes back to, you know, Kimberly and everyone else's explanation of it's really important to have a conversation with them so they know the why and they understand, especially if you just go out of nowhere and suddenly you're no longer doing accommodations, that can be very harmful. It doesn't help them understand the process behind it. So.
Anyone else before Jen talks? Oh, yep, go ahead. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So how do we help them identify and label their emotions without feeding back into that anxiety? And that's what I was kind of talking about in that last example I gave, that, you know, we're using those supportive statements to validate their emotions and help them label, especially if it's a young kid. Maybe they're not sure how they're feeling, and we're saying, oh, this is really big worry feelings right now. But we're not diving into the content of the anxiety. We're not talking about those airplanes. We're not talking about how many crashes there have been in the past month. We're just labeling, you know, validating how hard this is, and then trying to help them to, you know, sit in it, but also moving on with their day.
Okay, and you got to go ahead and get up and get started while kids are so cute about this. Once you teach them how to do this, then what I'm trying to help them do is to talk about it, not from it. So if in this, you don't have to be a child. You can be an adult and have the same experience. So talking from it is like, oh my God, I'm so worried about giving this presentation today. I'm sweating like crazy. I've been having diarrhea all day. I'm talking from the anxiety, right? I'm letting the anxiety talk about it. If I'm talking about it and I'm being curious about it, I'm like, wow, it is so fascinating how anxiety hijacks me every time I give a talk. And then I get the dang chemical dump, and then I gotta poop a lot, and like, wow, you know, and so I just went through that today, and here I am talking to all of you. And so notice how I'm talking about it, but when kids learn how to do that, they're like, man, my worry bully was so mean to me today. That is what we're looking at, is their ability to talk about it and be curious about how strong and powerful it was, rather than saying to you, Daddy, you know, I don't want to do that. I just don't make me do that. That's talking from it, okay? Jen has a lot to oh, we got another question? Oh. No. Yeah, so generalized anxiety are the worriers. They're the ones that are afraid of negative things happening in the future. And so that's kind of what Brianna said, the difference between fear and the worriers is that there's no direct evidence. Situational anxiety might be like, you know, I have a test and I'm really worried about the test. Generalized anxiety is like, you know, what if I don't get into the college that I want to get into? But, you know, I'm in 6th grade worrying about that. So we're working on them not paying attention to the scary story that shows up if there isn't any direct evidence. So it's being able to be like, oh, there's that worry story again. That's about the future. I'm not gonna talk to my brain about things about the future. I'm only gonna talk about things that are happening now. It actually, it's a skill that we practice. You don't turn it off. You don't give it attention. There's a practice that I do with my clients called awareness versus attention. I'm aware that that thought is hanging out and wanting me to give it attention, but I'm practicing being lazy with the thought. Just like when you're all on the couch and you know the laundry needs to be done and you're like, yeah, I know the laundry needs to be done, but no, I'm not getting off the couch. You actually can practice doing that with your thoughts. And it's a difficult practice, but if you come up to me afterwards, I'll actually give you a resource that will help you practice it, okay? Okay.
They must have turned off. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Yes. We're good. I'm going to apologize. I do have a little bit of a cold, so my voice may come in and out, but I'm just going to keep going. Thank you. It is what it is, you know? I'm not going to be anxious about it. I'm just letting you know. I'm going to keep going. Today I'm here to talk about ADHD. When we say the word ADHD, we all have that little kid that we're thinking about or a character in a movie. What ADHD means to you. What I've decided today to kind of talk to you about is that it is a neurodevelopmental disorder and kind of talk to you about what it feels like to have ADHD. What it means to have a neurodevelopmental disorder is that your developmental stage might not be the same as someone else going through time. So like when we have kids in school, a second grader may behave differently if they have ADHD than our neurotypical second grader. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on. And another thing is researchers right now, as we're looking at ADHD, most people think it's a disorder of attention, but it's really not about attention. A lot of people with ADHD can attend to a lot. They can have multi-attention. They can have something called hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is when they can just like sit in front of something and ignore everything else. It's just that. If you can get like a college age kid or older that hyperfocuses, they might like just start doing some homework and go right through and forget about eating, forget about picking somebody up, forget about something, because that tunnel focus, they can really focus well. What it truly is a disorder of our executive functions. We will talk, I'm going to put those up there for you. And during question time, if you guys have questions about what each one is or the definition of it, we can go into that. But right now they're looking at changing the word attention deficit hyperactivity disorder to executive function disorder. The first thing I want you to take away is people with ADHD struggle with self-regulation. So self-regulation, that's how they move themselves with attention, behavior, and emotion. They possess attention, but it can be hard for them at times. Like you may want them to start an activity and go all the way through the end. What happens with attention is they may start and then something else may grab their attention and they don't complete it. They've started it and then they get frustrated with themselves because they can't attend to the very end of the task. Our job as helpers or coaches or parents is to help them learn to self-regulate, start the task, and go all the way to the end. The second thing is ADHD affects the prefrontal cortex, with Brianna kind of explained that to us. That's this part of our brain that helps with regulating our emotions, making decisions, analyzing data, okay? So that part of our brain is impaired. What is also interesting is all of our executive functions, the working memory, the organization, the impulse control, emotional control, flexible thinking, task initiation, self-monitoring, and planning and prioritizing, they all take place in your prefrontal cortex. When you have that diagnosis, there is some deficit in one, and it could be all. I'm just going to quickly touch base on what working memory is, because that people might not understand the difference of there's working memory, short-term memory, long-term. I assume we all know what short-term and long-term is. Working memory is kind of, there's two ways to explain it. It's the shorter memory. It's like if you have those tabs open on your computer and you go back and forth through them. And another example is having to hold important information just for a short period of time. I always say it's like the sticky tabs you put. Like, I need to remember to bring my gym clothes tomorrow, but it's not something I have to know for the rest of my life, right? It's just that little bit, maybe for the next 12, 24 hours. So there's a deficit in that. And the other one I want to kind of just give a quick explanation is task initiation. I think you mentioned, I think it was Kimberly that said, like, I know that laundry's there, I'm not going to pay attention to it. When we're looking from the ADHD perspective, it's like, I see that laundry there, I just don't know how to get my body up and moving to go do it. Okay, so it's not that I'm anxious, it's just that I don't know how to get that motivation to go towards task initiation, okay? The next thing that we want to talk about is when you have ADHD is there's also less dopamine and norepinephrine. So those are two neurochemicals in our brain. There's less of that present in our prefrontal cortex. The tricky part about that is dopamine and norepinephrine are involved in our reward cycle, right? That has to do with motivation. What is that reward that we're going to do behavior to get? But these kiddos and adults don't have enough dopamine and norepinephrine. Later we'll talk about how do we increase those. It's going to be exercise, but we'll talk about what ways can we do to increase dopamine and norepinephrine to help with the motivation. The other thing that we need to do is we have to externalize that motivation, which sometimes people will be frustrated as, you know, we call it like a social coach with someone with ADHD. They're doing the lot of the prefrontal cortex and helping with these executive functions until they're able to do it on their own. Another thing when you have ADHD is you have waves of explosive emotions, which doesn't sound like fun, but again, remember we said this is a disorder of self-regulation. So remembering things, that is the self-regulation of memory, right? Now this is the self-regulation of emotion. So what happens is they get these big feelings and they don't necessarily know what to do with that feeling. When you have someone, and I'm going to combine the next one, the next part I'm going to kind of flip back and forth, is ADHD is genetic, right? The inheritability is 80%, which is pretty astounding. When I started doing this research back in the 90s, it started out at 25%. They have it at 80% now, which is similar to how much your height is inheritable from a parent. So when we're looking, going back to those waves of explosion, see, I can flip back between those two. That's flexible, which sometimes is hard for someone with ADHD. What we're going to do is go back, but now you have a parent, teacher, coach, whoever, guardian, helping a person regulate that emotion, but they're having the same difficulty themselves. So that's where sometimes getting someone on the outside to sit down and work together as a group to kind of plan to help with these big waves of emotions are very helpful to help them try to re-regulate themselves. The next thing is ADHD. This is the not fun part to share, but I do want to share that ADHD can have some negative effects on your life if you choose not to learn the self-regulation and management. The research tells us that children and parents with ADHD may engage in drugs and alcohol, frequent job changes, risky sexual behavior, car accidents, and relationship issues. So that's kind of one thing to kind of push us to kind of understand what ADHD does, because it doesn't have to rule their life. It doesn't have to. We can teach the self-regulation. We can teach how to externalize and not just make it on them, but have it about people around them to help them through this. The next thing is sometimes ADHD will make relationships hard. And I'm just kind of putting that out there, like as parents, I'm actually a parent that I have 2 ADHD children. There's times that it gets tough. But to realize and remember it is a disorder of regulation, it is not their character. Sometimes our brains get caught and we think, oh, they're a lazy kid. For us to go back and be like, they're not lazy, they're just not self-regulating with emotion, hold ourselves accountable to what is our part to help with that motivation for them to do it, right? So to kind of see it at that level, or take it for a different example and say, this kid never has a clean room, doesn't want to clean their room, doesn't want to clean their room. Then you got to take a step back and think about that motivation and that self-regulation of attention, behavior. Actually, they might need someone to help them. Here's a strategy or a tip for like a messy room. Or you could do a messy book bag or desk, wherever, what environment they're in. Maybe they need someone to help them with task initiation, which is that starting behavior. So what are some strategies for task initiation? Can you mirror? I know Brianna was talking about mirror. Can I stand with them? I'm not going to clean their bedroom, but physically being in the bedroom with them sometimes helps them. Look at the different things up here and know what in your brain you might be able to help them with. Planning and prioritizing. So if you're cleaning a room, helping them going, well, if I was going to clean the room, what would I do first? So guiding them to what is the first self-regulation of behavior. I'm going to pick up all their dirty clothes first and just put them in the hallway so I'm not visually seeing it. So trying to work them through that. Do you have to do it all the time? You might. You might have to keep training them until it becomes habit for them. But realizing it's not a character, it's part of their self-regulation, okay? I have a couple takeaways that I want you guys to take away. When I meet with families, I find that these are the three things that they're most like, oh man, I'm glad I heard that. I'm glad this makes sense, right? The first one is people with ADHD have time blindness. Has anyone ever heard of that? You have? It's when maybe you as a person, I'm going to pick on myself, you're like, oh, I'm going to go to Target, I'll be home in an hour. And you come home in 3. You have no idea. Your sense of time is not there. When you're going to be like, oh, I only have 5 minutes, but you end up talking 25 because that concept and that flow of time isn't there. Dr. Ned Nowell, he's the author of an amazing book, Driven by Distraction, which is wonderful. If you have yourself or a loved one with ADHD, it's a really good read. His comment is, in the world of ADHD, there is now and not now. So there's not an in-between. That is something that we have to kind of hold on to. And the other thing with this is not every kid needs to be medicated for ADHD. That's absolutely true. But when someone is medicated, time blindness doesn't go away. That is not a part that is effective. It's just part of their brain that's not connected. And I'm going to give another little example with time blindness with some strategies. Is if you have a kiddo, well, actually I'm going to pause on that and use it with my next one. The next one is the 30% rule. Has anyone ever heard of that? So the 30% rule, remember at the very beginning when I said it was developmental? That's that 30% behind. Our prefrontal cortex is the last part of our brain to develop, okay? As our brain develops, it kind of goes from the back all the way to the front. And normally, a brain will develop about till age 25. In ADHD, your brain's not fully developed till 30. And again, these are like ifs. It's not like 25 and now you have a full-grown brain, or 30, you're there. These are kind of like issues in life, okay? So our expectation of a child would be like a 12-year-old would be a 12-year-old. Oops. Hold on one second. It's on the very bottom. I wanted to reference that. So when we have a 13-year-old, their developmental level is going to be more like a 10-year-old. If we have a 17-year-old, more like a 12-year-old. So our expectation of chores at home, homework, emotional regulation on a sports field, when they're doing karate, if you have a 13-year-old, you're going to be thinking, what would a 10-year-old do? And have that same expectation of behavior. I'm going to switch real quick to the 17-year-old. When we have our, juniors and seniors thinking about going to college, those steps that need to take place to get to college, we know that we talk about with our friends, what's your kid doing? How are they doing? What's going on? We can't compare someone with ADHD to someone that doesn't have ADHD. We have to remember that it's, that neurodevelopmental part of it, right? So we might need to help more than someone else, right? We might need to put in ADHD, they call it scaffolding. Those are the things that you're doing to help that child. You might have to help a little bit more than someone else would need help. What we also want to think about is the time management and making sure, because of the time blindness, that we chunk time out for them to do it. We don't expect them to be able to do that, right? Will that expectation come? Sure. We hope everyone gets to 30. We hope that as we work with them and we manage their behaviors, we help them manage and self-regulate their emotions, we're going to get to 30. And that brain will develop. It's amazing when you have kids that go through high school and then you have a kid that goes through high school that has ADHD. That pop in emotional and behavior regulation that happens at 18, it really kind of happens at 21. And they're coming back and forth to college, and all of a sudden, you're like, wow, you are getting it. And that's where some of that reward comes back. The third key concept is that hyperactivity isn't only physical, but it can be mental. And I appreciate you sharing this earlier, that a lot of times hyperactivity in the brain gets confused with anxiety. And we even have to talk about with each other, sometimes with a client, like, hey, is this rooted in anxiety? Like, are they anxious about something? Or is it their ADHD and they're just like talking and going and going? It might not be an anxious root. It might be an ADHD root. And to pull those apart, those are the three main concepts, like the time blindness, the 30% rule, in that hyperactivity doesn't only have to be physical, okay? Let's go to, I want to look at the time real quick. Let's go to, I'm going to quickly go over skills and strategies. The big five: sleep, we know that that's very important, 7 to 8 hours. We're going to go over nutrition real quick. We want them to eat, a healthy diet. With nutrition, one thing that we need to be aware of, it's the inflammation in the brain, also with ADHD. That's why we want to watch the sugar and the dyes. It's the inflammation of the brain, so all those impulses and those thoughts can go through quicker. If it's all inflamed, they don't go as quick. They're kind of slowing down there. Exercise. I want to take a second and talk about exercise. Okay. Yeah, let me grab it. Thanks. Exercise, it's different for exercising for like your cardio health and for attention, okay? When you're exercising for attention, it's quick and it's hard, right? Like, so you might want to tell your kiddo, all right, get up and do 10 jumping jacks. Let's do 10 squats together. And then they can do their power focus of, whatever their homework is. But you always want to do a short spout of a little bit of exercise to help their focus. I've worked with numerous teachers in many different school districts. Also, if we can get those kiddos to maybe like shoot a couple baskets, run around the gym a couple times before their test, it helps regulate them so they can be more sharp. We're looking for that mind-body connect. With little kiddos, sometimes we put them on like a balance ball, so they're always kind of mind-body connecting to help them focus. We also want to think about the exercise in the time of green time versus, like a sports. Green time is outside. If we get kids outside in nature, they're listening to the natural rhythms of nature. And that's very helpful for them too. It helps engage in the parasympathetic system. The next one is the team. Team for ADHD is parents, children, we got grandparents maybe, we might have a coach, whoever works with the child. So those systems that we put into place to help with the self-regulation, they are all using the same language. They're all using the same system. So it is easier to flow between the whole day for the children, okay? The next one is a calendar. What is also helpful with ADHD is you take 1 day a week. I choose Sunday. I don't care what day you do it. I choose Sunday because it's the beginning of the week, and that's when I like to organize. But you sit down with your kid. You're like, okay, What went well last week? What didn't go well last week? What can I help you do? What can we do? This is what's on the calendar. So if someone has like a project that's due on Friday, remember that time blindness? We're not just going to say it's due on Friday. We're going to say on Monday, let's put down, we have to answer 3 questions. Tuesday, we got to read 4 pages. We're going to put exactly what they need to do each day and hang that calendar up so they can look at 1 24-hour each day. We don't want to give them a whole huge one because it's now and not now. We want to just kind of do it just very quick that way. The next thing that I'm going to kind of go over real quick is number 2, the brain breaks and study breaks. This isn't so much for the little kids because they don't have a lot of homework, but when you get like in middle school or in high school, you want to make sure that we understand that power of focus. Every 15 minutes, they might need a quick break. What's a quick break? 2-3 minutes, right? One thing that helps us focus too is music. So you might want to say, like on a Sunday night, let's create our study list, our study music list for this week. If you go to Spotify, you can type in music for studying, and there are music sets already out there made. You can do 1, 2, 3 songs that have no words. The 4th song has a word. So they're going to power study for about 15 minutes, have a 2 to 3 minute break, do another 3 songs or 4. You'll get to know and help regulate with your child if they can do 3 or 4, and then the next song has words. When that song with words, you don't have to coach them. This is giving them the independence. When they hear the words, they can get up, they can run to the bathroom, they can get a drink, but they have to come back and sit down when the words and the music stop. So kind of using those little strategies with them. The last one I'm going to go over is the power of self-regulation. Self-regulation is our emotions, right? How they become so big and how we can get them down, smaller. Like Brianna said, we want to validate. They're having a big emotion. They're allowed to have that emotion. We're allowed to tell them, like, wow, this is really overwhelming for you right now. But we want to help them work down when they have ADHD. How are they going to calm down? Do we need to do some breaths? Do we need to go outside and walk around? Sometimes when people are really elevated, like I always have like a lemon and an orange in my freezer that, do you need to hold on to that to kind of, to focus yourself? I guess Kimberly brought the warheads. You could give them a warhead, something to kind of shift their brain, okay? But there's a lot of strategies and tools with ADHD that we can do to help them learn that regulation. Because remember, it's the self-regulation of the memory and that behavior that helps them understand. I want to end with, and as I was looking at this, I noticed the quote is from Dr. Ned, not Ed, Howell. So sorry about that, guy. But ADHD is not a curse, it's a gift. It depends on how you look at it. When I meet my ADHD clients, I always tell them, I'm like, I love this diagnosis. Like, I love the way your brain works. And my colleagues can attest to that. I do. I get so excited because they are so creative and they're so energized. Like, for me, I just really enjoy working with them. But I'm going to kind of close for a little bit and see if anyone has any questions on ADHD. Go ahead. Okay. Okay. But he's not. Nope. Yeah. 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 Sure, yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. This is not a disorder of intelligence at all. It's definitely a disorder of self-regulation. ADHD kids are usually very intelligent. They're very smart people. It's not intelligence, it's how we get that out of them. One thing I might suggest is when we're planning that self-regulation is before you send them, right? Kind of like plan, like, okay, so if you get it, first of all, how were they told that they made the team? Like in front of everyone is what I'm assuming the way you said it. Okay. 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 Well, right. And I'm glad you're working for change for that, right? Because when we think of a kid with ADHD, that's just too much. That's a wave of emotion. One thing you could have done is kind of talk to him before. And we know with ADHD this would help. It doesn't make it perfect. But so if you get on the team, how are we going to respond? If you don't get on the team, how are you going to respond? Difficulty is you didn't know how they were going to be told, right? So now we're going to make sure that is known before. The other thing is maybe having the coaches understand that he has ADHD too. But you're right, coaches they need trained, absolutely. With my kids, I always walked up and approached, and I don't care that they have ADHD. I'm like, hey, my kid has ADHD. I want you to know about time blindness. I want you to know about 30%. I want you to know there's waves of roller coasters, and if you need me, let me know. I don't have a problem. If you think there's drills and stuff that are going to really, agitate, let me know. I can sit there, Which is the difference of supporting and not what? No, I can't.
Go ahead and just speak.
Go ahead. I hear you. You're right. Even if they are trained, it doesn't, yeah. That is frustrating. That's where I think we all have to work towards change, right?
So one of the things that I really want to encourage, and again, this would have come up in a minute when I share, our job and our goal is to train and educate as many people as possible, in particular teachers, support staff, security guards, principals, coaches, all of that. And the other thing that we want to equip our kids with is to let them know that they don't have to be wrapped in bubble wrap. Because I don't know about you, but I spend about 90% of my day tolerating things that I'm not a huge fan of, okay? And that doesn't come naturally. In fact, waiting my turn, right, is hard. I don't know how the one person with ADHD ended up being the last one to present, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta move, right? And I'm like, let me stand. So I and I'm like, I have all of these self-regulation skills, so I will not bounce in my chair because I'm an adult professional presenting. And inside it's like, blah, okay? So I think with all of the challenges that we're talking about here, one of the gifts is that number one, the skills we're talking about are transferable, right? Learning how to self-regulate is hands down one of the hardest things we're ever going to do as human beings. I mean, I have days in my 40s where I fail, and my 9-year-old goes, Mom, do you want to try unicorn breathing? And I'm like, no, I don't. Yes, thank you, And so let's practice some grace for all of us, and let's not accidentally fall into wrapping our kids in bubbles where we're like, I need everybody to accommodate, nor are we going to not encourage and support and accommodate when appropriate. So we don't want to blame, nor do we want to excuse. And it's such a balance, like no one, including ourselves. I mean, I can't go home and parent perfect, and I have all of these people to tell me how to do it in books and letters, and every now and then I'm like, if you don't brush your teeth, you lose every toy for life. And I know that isn't the answer, right?
It happens.
Okay, so the reason that I'm saying this, I'm not minimizing because I know how hard it can be working with multiple people, but I want to remind you when we talk with our kids, like, hey buddy, we are all here to try to support and help, and I want to come up with the best plan possible ahead of time, and I want to talk about some things to do if Coach Kristen rolls her eyes, or if, you say, you're late 5 minutes again, and you have to deal with that, shame.
Shame.
Yeah, because they're going to have a boss like that one day,
Chris,
So,
let me finish this up real quick, and I'm going to give you actually the phone. So, like what she was just saying, make sure you talk to your son. Don't let him spiral in shame. So, you know what? That's part of his regulation of ADHD. You know what? He didn't do his best regulating of emotion. Okay, we're going to do it again next time. Like, don't be like, oh my goodness. Don't let him wrap himself in shame for that outburst. He had an outburst. He probably responded 30% behind. Okay, let's keep going. We didn't make, I forgot the sport, and I'm sorry. Basketball, baseball, baseball. Is there a different baseball? Like maybe we're trying out for school and maybe we need to try out for club. Maybe we need, or do we want to do a little baseball league in the neighborhood? How can we do it differently? And just kind of go from that.
And also, just in the spirit of educating as many people as we can, this is being recorded, so as soon as it's out there for you, please share it with as many people as you can. Give it to the coach, give it to the grandparents, and also, if it hasn't already been sent out, Dr. Carnes does have a list of resources for you all, so please utilize those, share them, contact us if you need to. Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. Mm-hmm. We have to help them. Right, right.
And even for teachers to be able to say, yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, but even for teachers to have the skill to say, for those of you who have a hard time getting started on it now, let's break this down. So what might you do today in order to have that done by Friday at midnight? So that's how we all need to be coaching people. Someone had a question here.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm going to let Kristen's, that's trauma right here. I'm going to give that to her to ask. We're going to let her do her talk, and then we're going to open it up for anybody, and then I can grab your guys' questions. If not, we can stay afterwards, okay?
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm going to start answering your question in 1 minute, okay? If you can give me 1 minute, because, come on. All right, there we go, trauma. Okay, so what is trauma? Okay, I am going to ask each of you to raise your hand if you know someone that you're close to, if you've experienced it, if you've witnessed it, okay? And I just want you to put your hand up every time, okay? Anybody in here lose someone that they love or that is important? Anybody with military or active duty, family, friends, loved ones? Anybody ever in a car accident? Anybody ever have a really scary medical illness? Anybody ever have a loved one who was really sick? Or, okay, have you ever been a primary caretaker, like to parents, to someone, yes, that needs ongoing care? Has anybody ever experienced something where their life was in danger? Or they thought their life might be in danger? Yeah. Anybody ever terrified or know anyone that was terrified that their parents would die? Okay? It doesn't have to be that they were actually about to die. Okay? Anybody ever get picked on? Anybody ever get body shamed? Anybody ever do something super embarrassing? Yeah. Seriously, right? I know. Anybody ever get hurt? Break a bone, injury? Yeah, okay. I could keep going. Have you ever known anyone or experienced sexual abuse, or known of people that have experienced sexual abuse? Okay, anybody ever been catcalled? No? Come on. Anybody ever have derogatory names or statements, or basically, you know, you're a poo-poo head in some way or shape or form? Yeah. Anybody have a boss you're like terrified of because they're actually a total meanie pants? I hang out with kids, so yeah, okay. Anybody ever been demeaned? Anybody ever been lied about? Right? I could keep going, okay? Anybody ever known someone, seen someone experience physical abuse, hitting, punching, kicking, etc.? Okay. All right. So pretty much, you probably noticed some people got tired raising their hands, right? But the bottom line is, as beautiful and as joy-filled and as amazing as life can be, life is hard, and we are wired for struggle. Okay? Like, stuff is hard. And if you think about like little kids, man, learning how to walk is a full-time job. And I forget this sometimes when I'm working with my 9-year-old, you know, when I'm like, please brush your teeth, please brush your teeth, please brush your teeth, right? I just do it automatically. Sometimes I'm lazy and I don't when I get in bed and forget. But I'm an adult, so I can make poor life choices. I pay for my teeth, right? So one of the things that I want to remind you of, okay, is that trauma is about perception. It is about power. It is about experience. It is so individualized, okay? I can't tell you how many kids, how many adults will share with me as children, well, this is silly, okay? And they'll share something where they genuinely thought, like, for example, they might have a parent who was receiving chemo. Nobody wanted to talk about what was going on, right? So they just disappear for 6 weeks. Or they're like, mommy's fine, but her hair's falling out and she doesn't look okay. So when we deny reality, or when we try to avoid, even with good intention, right? It is so easy, or when we forget that perception is key to understanding trauma, right? It is very easy to be like, it's fine, everything will be okay. And my colleagues have already talked about how using supportive statements and some of the other things, all of those skills actually apply to helping kids through traumatic experiences. But there's a couple things I'm hoping you take away today. One is to remember that just because you don't find something, quote, traumatic or really stressful, doesn't mean that it isn't traumatic or stressful to someone else, okay? There's a lot of factors that go into whether or not something overwhelms us. Number two, we want to think about, with ourselves and others, the idea of compassion, the idea of offering and extending a benefit of the doubt, and have a very inclusive, open definition of trauma. And so it is truly about perceived threat, and it is about the overwhelming of one's ability to cope in the moment, okay? This is particularly important, right? In part because we're looking at the emotional and psychological impact here, but much like other people brought up and my colleagues have talked about, the physiological response is profound. We know that untreated acute traumatic experiences, in particular during childhood or within the first 10 years of life, where you have ongoing neglect, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, or even one incident or multiple, okay? And when people do not receive support, what we find is profound changes to the brain and body. We have cardiovascular changes, we have neuropsychological changes. So part of the reason that I'm highlighting this is we also as a community have a responsibility to be aware. And one thing that I want to make everybody really aware of, and sometimes I talk about things that like we kind of don't want to admit, is with kids, sometimes kids are honestly more likable than others for a variety of reasons. And on occasion, even though nobody ever wants to admit that, part of it has to do with our ability to cope with their behavior, okay? So I love a kid that bounces off walls. That doesn't bother me. But if that's overstimulating for someone, you could really injure that kid by being short or being frustrated or being annoyed or, you know, Billy, sit down, sit down. Why can't you ever sit down? What's wrong with you, right? And on the one hand, those are, that is our failure as adults to self-regulate. So I'm going to ask you to do something super crazy. You have to be really flexible here. On the one hand, I want you to challenge yourself to look inward and note, where have I gotten stuck and not been able to self-regulate? Where have I not been able to hold space for a child or for, I mean, heck, for a husband, for anybody, right? And and myself. And take a moment and think about what's one way that I can practice interacting with my peers and my children in a more trauma-informed way. And that starts by acknowledging that life is hard and that we deserve some self-compassion, and that what overwhelms us physiologically or overwhelms our ability to cope in that moment can be very broad. And so I'm getting somewhat to what you had brought up related to your son, and I'll talk about this in a moment. Bullying, whether it's from other adults, unintentionally, or kids, is one of the biggest traumatic experiences that I run into. Most people, by the time you're an adult, have experienced a multitude of significant stresses and losses. When we look at the statistics, we know that 1 in 3 women are going to experience sexual violence. We estimate that it's about 1 in 5 men, okay? I have chills thinking about that. I could keep going. We know the rates of generalized anxiety, probably around 20%. We know the number of people that are going to lose someone by their mid-20s is unbelievable, something like 60 plus. I could name stats all day long, okay? And what we have here is not, the message isn't take away the world is inherently dangerous. The message is life is hard, and I don't know who created what, and we're not here to talk about that, but like all of us have to experience loss, right? We have the option to support and teach our kids that they can do hard things. And that we are not, Brene Brown talks about the most dangerous thing that we try to perfect are our children. Because that's not what we're supposed to do. So when you leave here, please do not leave going, I'm going to implement all of this, I'm going to take notes, I'm going to make it perfect, and I'm not going to mess my kids up like my mom and dad did, right? No. Anybody ever get stuck in, I'll do better than my parents? Come on. All right. My parents are fabulous, but I always joke because I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be my mom, and I'm totally my mom. So anyways, the physical stress response is automatic, okay? Has anybody ever won anything in here? Anybody ever, okay, what'd you win? You won some money, perfect. What did you win? A raffle basket. What about you? A paddleboard. Okay, anybody? Do you remember being excited? Yeah, okay. One time I had colleagues that played a joke on me and they gave me a fake lottery ticket, just so you know, and I thought I won $10,000. And yeah, they filmed it, by the way. It was not them. Yeah, it was funny. I was a little mad. They bought me lunch. But anyways, I didn't win, it was fake. But the point here is that feeling, I remember, I was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I was flipping. I really thought I won. And that's the same feeling that you get when you're terrified. But one, the story was I won $10,000, right? And the other is, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. And part of the reason that I bring that up is our bodies only have so many physiological responses. So much like when you're working with kids with self-regulation or kids that are struggling with a feeling of anxiety or anxiety-producing situations or anxiety disorders, we want to help kids learn that the physical sensations in our body are not inherently dangerous, okay? And we didn't mention this earlier, but if you do have a kid where they start to have symptoms that they never had before, part of what we do is rule out medical to begin with. So it would make sense, if they've never had a stomach issue and now they're vomiting or whatever, that you would take them to their doctor and discuss it and look at all of those areas. So that's the kind of rule out. But one of the other things we want to do is we also want to help people understand sometimes the traumatic events we're going to experience are actually, hey, my body's not working the way I thought it was supposed to, right? And I don't know about anybody else, but aging has really humbled me. So I've got all kinds of new aches and pains. And if I focused my flashlight of attention on the hip and the this and the that, like I legit probably wouldn't get out of bed. You know what I mean? And part of the reason that I'm sharing that is it's a small, tiny thing. We can take things like aging and avoid it and be angry and get frustrated and like build stories, right? We can attach stories to it. Like, what if my worth is connected to being young, right? Things like that. And I think most women in here would be able to be like, oh yeah, I remember getting that message. You guys get to age gracefully, so, you know, there's another trauma, sexism, right? So when we think about these things, just because you may not have experienced them, it's really, really important to remember that everybody's had very different experiences and to be open to that. And when I'm talking about these things, if I'm gonna shine my flashlight of attention, I can go, oh, wow, okay, you know what? I didn't want to have knee pain, right? But I can talk about it, I can accept it, I can choose a values-based goal-directed behavior. We get to shine our flashlight of attention onto things that we want to work towards. And so when we're helping people build a life as survivors and helping them have a better understanding of how to honor their experience in their body, not only do we want to have that inclusive and open definition of trauma, we want to ask those open-ended questions. So coming back to the discussion of like bullying, help me understand what's been going on, right? We are human, we're animals, guys, all right? And we are pack animals. We are designed to biologically seek acceptance. Now, thankfully, there's like a bunch of different tribes now, okay? So instead of like one tribe, and if we get voted out, then our fight or flight or autonomic nervous system is activated, that amygdala and these other parts of what we often refer to as the reptilian brain, okay? They get activated and they're like, oh my gosh, if we get voted out of here, we're gonna die. We're not gonna be okay, okay? Thankfully, there's like millions of tribes we can choose from now. So if their tribe is like Mean Girls, right? Then I'm gonna go over here and be like, hey ladies, do you wanna create a tribe where we're not mean? And so part of what we wanna do when we're talking about dealing with relational trauma, especially because kids often do not have the same type of power and freedom that we do as adults, okay? They just don't. They don't have the money, they don't have the voice, you know, you don't need me to explain that. We wanna help them recognize that it is normal to sort of want, like, quote, everybody to like you, and it's normal to feel hurt or to feel sad. We wanna validate that. We wanna be like, wow, man, that's really hard. Every now and then we wanna agree with them, okay? Off the record, like, you're right, that girl is a special human being that we'll pray for, okay? They want someone real. They want to know that. You can validate it, okay? What they're feeling, what they're going through, and listen. And then you also want to empower them to let them know, and even though you feel that way, like, you're capable of feeling sad and hurt and knowing that your inherent worth and value hasn't changed. Like, you're right, buddy. All of us are a little different, and right now you're in a tough spot because most kids are trying to be the same, okay? So let's look for some ways. How can we help you find friends that are like, you're kind of cool? Like I said, I have a 9-year-old, and I was telling her something, and we were back to the argument about brushing her teeth. And I got a little frustrated. This is about a year ago, and I finally said, you know what? Okay, if you want to be the smelly kid, go ahead. And I said that, and I said, I remember who got picked on in 2nd grade. And she looked at me, and she goes, Mom, weird is the new pretty. And none of my friends would make fun of me for that. They would just be like, get a mint. And I'm like, okay, all right. So they're enlightened. Maybe we need to also believe in them. Maybe we need to let them know one of the first things we want to do in helping them navigate things at school, like, you and I may not think that certain things are traumatic. But if you step out of that word and you say, this has overwhelmed my ability to cope. If it overwhelms the skills that you have to cope, then the body experiences it as traumatic. And that's particularly important when you have some kids that are experiencing neurodivergence for any particular reason, okay? And so if you're looking at some of the ADHD moments, right, that self-regulation, it can become so big, it feels completely, quote, traumatic, okay? So that's where you get, and there's other developmental factors, but we're chuckling because we're looking backwards. So we're going, so-and-so not taking you to the dance isn't that big of a deal, or you're better than that. Again, we don't want to do that. We're invalidating what they're feeling. Like, I think all of us were teenagers, right? Okay, so does anybody remember the awkwardness of middle school, high school, and like even if you really enjoyed it, there were still all these unanswered questions and this pressure for many of us. So try to put yourself there, okay? When we talk about trauma, one of the other big things, I put up myth versus fact, and this is just a beginning. One of the biggest myths is that people think if you experience a traumatic event, like then you will develop a disorder or PTSD, or people have like these ideas around it has to be a certain level of like extreme, okay? Or it needs to be military service, or like we tend to have our own biases and misconceptions, and that's why, again, keep going back to the idea, trauma is if it overwhelms one's ability to cope, okay? So anyways, a couple things up here. How many people have avoided things in their life? Come on. Yeah, I avoid laundry, so. Okay, so anyways, don't talk about it. We do this all the time. We do this with infant loss. We do this with infertility. We do it, and we do this with conflict within family. We do it with all kinds of trauma, like, oh, you know what, it's over and we're just not going to talk about it. I don't want to upset Jennifer, right? Oh, she lost her mom, but, we did the funeral, we did all that, not going to talk about it. Everything's fine. I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine, okay? Please don't do that. I would ask you, on the one hand, you may be really skilled at using avoidance, and there, most of us can speak to the fact everybody avoids sometimes, everybody numbs sometimes. When it becomes habitual, it becomes problematic. And that's where you start to see not only a worsening and increase in disorders related to anxiety and PTSD, but you often start to see behavioral changes within the family and classroom, and what you're teaching the brain is that they are not able to cope, okay? And so what that means is we want to be able to sit down and create space where kids can talk. And I know a lot of parents will say, well, they don't want to talk to me. You know what, that's okay. You're not going to force them. I always talk about like this idea of like, we want to take our kids and we get a new skill. Well, maybe you don't, but I have been guilty of, I learn and I'm like, I'm going to connect with my daughter and ask this great question, right? And it's sort of like I'm waterboarding her, like, you will share, and you try and like force them, right? And that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do, So you can ask a question once, like capture them in the car and they need $20 and say, Jen, I just want you to know when you're ready to talk about grandma, I'm here. I'm missing her a lot, and I can't imagine that you haven't felt some of those feelings too. And if they're like, that's okay. Let them, right? That's it. You're not going to be like, why are you doing that? Don't you see everything I do for you, right? You're going to think it, and you can tell your friends about it. But what you're doing is you're opening that up. You're just acknowledging that it's okay to have the space. And the more we share and the more validation that people have and the safety that they feel in expressing an emotion, right, the less, it's some of the biggest preventers of things like post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? One of the other big things that occurs, and this is like not necessarily up there, but I just want to mention it, the development of PTSD or other trauma-related disorders correlates very much with the amount of stigma associated with the type of trauma they experience, okay? And so that is often why you see significantly higher rates of PTSD when there is sexual violence. So my suggestion is if you have a child who has experienced sexual violence, that you reach out and you connect with the CVC, you connect with a clinician, not because they have PTSD, but because you can preemptively offer a lot of support, or that you get that for yourself. Because the reality of the situation is seeing those that we love suffer, right, is traumatic. It's so hard to be powerless. So anyways, a couple other things here, like the focusing on the positive, right? Or they still talk to or want to see the person, so it must not be true. These are two big ones that I want to mention. This is especially true with kids, okay? You could have the meanest, most harmful person, and your kid might go try and be best friends with them the next day. And part of that is developmentally, they're trying to survive the social hierarchy, okay? Part of it is, again, we're hardwired for connection. Part of it is trauma often has a response where we do fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And many people don't think of fawn. Anybody ever heard of fawn? Or is that the first time you've ever heard it in here? Okay, so fawn is I'm gonna make friends with my captor. I'm gonna make friends with my abuser. So if I experience date rape, I'm gonna date him so people don't call me a slut. Bottom line, okay? Happens all the time. And then people are like, must not have been true. She hung out with him for 2 months. If your kid comes to you and they share that they have experienced trauma, your job is to hold that space. Your job is not to ask them, are you sure? Are you confused? It's really important. It's really, really important. And to not tell stories about how things can't possibly be true because of the way they respond. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is about survival, okay? So naturally, if you're coming at me and I need to survive, my autonomic system is going to take over. Your sympathetic nervous system takes over. Most of that is involuntary. I want you to think about first responders and how much they train, okay? They train over and over and over and over and over and over again. And by the way, this is a whole group of people that are like innately dedicated towards kind of choosing to, let's say, go into a fire. I can tell you right now, I'm not interested in going in a fire, right? So, but part of the reason they have some core beliefs or values or passions or skills, right? And they train over and over again because they have to learn how to override their autonomic nervous system, okay? We don't have time for feelings if you're trying to put a fire out and pull somebody out of it. And so you set that whole part aside. We can't flight if we're the ones that need to go in. And so to have the expectation that our loved ones or our kids or ourselves should magically act in a certain way is not realistic, okay? Trauma is only, and this is one of my favorites, right? An event can be traumatic to one person and not another. I've already said that, but I can't say it enough. I've noticed that, as a Gen Xer, occasionally I do enjoy a joke about how we were maybe the last awesome generation. And we drank from hoses. Come on. All right. If you have old millennials in here, you guys are cool. All right. Okay. All right. But you know what? Our kids and anyone in a younger generation here, they're not inherently weaker. In fact, quite frankly, the whole idea of like you're weak if you have a feeling is probably part of why we had so many challenges. So when we think about this, it's not that we're weak because we acknowledge. I'm not suggesting that experiencing hardship or stress or a traumatic event, right, is an excuse to act out. I'm suggesting that instead of writing the story like my colleagues have brought up, that somebody isn't motivated or doesn't want to or is just difficult, maybe we just acknowledge like, hey, their defense system's up and I'm not going to make this a moral dilemma. I'm going to look at ways to offer support and also set boundaries. And one of my favorite phrases when it comes to working with families and working really with anything is love without boundaries is incomplete, okay? Love without boundaries is incomplete. So I can love somebody incredibly and I'm still gonna set a boundary. And I think, one of the examples I like to use because it tends to disarm people is, if grandpa is having worsening dementia and he tends to get physically violent on occasion at night, we don't just leave grandma there to figure it out because we love him, right? That's not him. That's a symptom of what's occurring in his brain. So we want to set everybody up for success. And that is true with trauma symptoms. That's true with emotional dysregulation. That's true with school refusal. So it's easy sometimes to be like, oh, that behavior isn't acceptable. And you're right, the behavior isn't acceptable. We want to create safety for everyone, but we don't want to label the person struggling as that's who they inherently are. The last part, they don't have PTSD, so it's fine. So yeah, we know that's not true, right? Being able to validate our emotional experiences and acknowledge how hard things are is probably one of the most healing things we can do. Support prevents ongoing issues. So part of what we want to do is we want to be able to educate our kids and ourselves about body sensation, educate our kids and about ourselves about the fact that we're hardwired for struggle, that stress will occur, and when we get overwhelmed, sometimes our nervous system responds automatically, and we don't get to choose necessarily how we respond initially, but there's a lot of different ways that we can learn to self-regulate or co-regulate. So little kids, I'm always going to say go to co-regulate, but quite frankly, anybody, go to co-regulate. Has anybody ever tried to argue with someone who's extremely intoxicated? How's that work out? Does it work? Yeah, okay. So this is why this is relevant. The amount of chemicals dumped when you are in a fight or flight, okay? When you're in fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, okay? So that means your whole sympathetic nervous system is take over and you're in, I need to survive, okay? And by the way, it doesn't have to be a real threat. So like, for example, if I survive abuse and then when somebody gives me, let's say somebody gives me constructive criticism and it feels like an attack, and then I experience those same sensations in my body, I might go to fight. I might be reliving physically or psychologically abuse, even though you're like, well, you know, your boss only gave you feedback, right? So that's where we want to practice. That's not an excuse for somebody to like cuss out their boss. What it is like, wow, I need to be able to self-regulate. So some of the first things we want to do with kids is it starts by co-regulating with them. And one of the best ways we can do that when appropriate and possible, and again, like, you need to have consent, especially if it isn't your kid. Can I touch you? Okay, but like if she's flipping out and I know her, and depending, I might just sit like this. I have never been furious and felt better when somebody tells me I'm wrong, right? And I've never felt better when they're like, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? I mean, does anybody else respond well to that? Yeah, okay. Or I might just, like when they're little, I might hug her, you know? I might come over and do that. So now again, some kids actually do not want to be touched, and so you need to be aware of that, right? And you need to have a plan. One of the other things you can do, and again, this is going to seem odd, we're not trying to fix how they feel, okay, because we are going to revisit things. But in the trauma world, we talk about a window of tolerance. So if you're way overstimulated, or if you have absolutely no feeling at all, right, numbness, then you're not in the window of tolerance, and that means you're not going to be able to learn. So I saw this magic at Country Fair. It's a punching poo pen. Distraction. Because what I just did, I mean, that's cool. I bought 2 of them so that we could battle. Is I've now popped the bubble. So just much like anxiety tells a story, so does trauma. And so if I'm triggered and I'm in the I need to survive and stay safe, and I am literally, I have a tiger coming at me, that's what my nervous system is telling me, okay? One of the ways to interrupt that is pop the bubble. Total distraction. We switch topics, we move on, we come back in a few minutes. You can teach other grounding skills, but whenever you teach a grounding skill, it is important to remember my goal is to not remove your feelings. My goal isn't to make you feel better. My goal isn't to tell you you shouldn't be sad anymore or focus on the positive. That is frustrating and harmful. My goal is to help you so that you're able to come back into the moment, into the present moment, and to engage the prefrontal cortex, okay? And kids love this stuff. In fact, honestly, adults do too, okay? Poo is always a win. Yeah. So anyways, last but not least, and I'm just good, wait, hold on. Let me just bring this bad boy up. The whole idea is, you have your kid wear a seatbelt, right? Because that's appropriate prevention. You want to know the parents if they're going to go to a sleepover. You teach them about their bodies. You use the actual words. You talk to them about these things. You help them understand the function. I mean, these are all things that help prevent trauma and harm, okay? We really work on developing skills to not get stuck in shame-based parenting, okay? We practice addressing our own stuff. We use all the skills that my colleagues have talked about. And by doing so, when we acknowledge that things are hard, and we're able to help them co-regulate and also demonstrate that, we foster resilience. So there's about a dozen other things that I could talk about to foster resilience. I'm going to let you read that, but also I'm going to encourage you to notice that you have so much power to validate somebody and to just simply be like, your inherent worth and value does not change. It doesn't change if you get an A. It doesn't change if you don't take the test. It doesn't change, no matter what. And I'm here for you, and I don't know all the answers, but you matter, and we're going to figure this out together, okay? So with that, I'm going to kind of open it up for questions. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. And the very last side, it all feels too much, said the fox. It's okay not to be okay, replied the moon, as long as you know you won't feel this way forever. And that, too, related to trauma, is so, so important because there is relief and healing. So I'll kind of keep it open to my colleagues.
Thanks. You externalize, so does time blindness ever change? My colleagues know me. I'm like, what was the question? Because I already had the answer going in my brain. So what you want to do is, your skills and your strategies, what you're going to externalize. And when I say externalize, you're going to use your phone to kind of set up alarms. You're going to use like an Alexa, or what's those other things called? Alexa or whatever the other brand was. I can't think of. Oh, like Siri, to do those kind of things. Like, so when you're leaving let's say you're getting your kiddos ready and you're going to work, right? And I'm going to decide you have ADHD in this scenario too, so okay? We're just rolling with it. So you might, for your own sake of like time blindness, let's say you have to leave at 8:15. 8 o'clock, Siri or Alexa, whatever those things are, says, it's 8 o'clock, you have 15 minutes. Everyone needs to grab their bags, sneakers, and lunchbox. It's Tuesday, don't forget your gym clothes. Because then for you, it's cueing you as an adult with ADHD, and it's cueing the kids. So we're going to externalize everything and kind of use those things. Your husband, partner may call you at 4 o'clock and say, see how I'm deciding your whole life here? He may call and say, hey, it's 4 o'clock, don't forget you got 15 minutes to get down to the field to pick up the kids. So you're going to work together as your partnership to build in those, that's called the scaffolding. Those are the skills and the strategies to help with time blindness. And with that as well, we can't shame and blame and start that circle that we were talking about, because it is something that they don't have. It's not that they're choosing to forget or not choosing to be aware. It is part of like, hey, you have blue eyes, not green eyes. Go ahead. Okay. Okay. So we're going to do do you want to say something? ADHD
autism, he's higher functioning. But now he gets ready for school independently. We did time, the timers and stuff like that in the morning. But he needed prompts initially, but now with the alarms and stuff.
Your point is a good one because you said 6th grade, I think, and now he's in 9th grade. So first of all, or 3rd grade, 9th grade, okay, he's in 4th, whatever. Okay, but the point is that oftentimes when we teach skills and a person does them, they come back and they say it didn't work. I can't tell you how many times I hear that in a day, but I try to socialize people before they tell me that, which is the goal is to practice this over and over and over again. And I say to everyone, first give it a whole year of practicing that. Like when I was trying to teach my kids to pick up their room, that's like what we worked on for an entire year, okay? And so your expectation has to be, we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again. And at some point, you're going to be like her, which is like, oh, isn't that interesting? He seems to be responding to the prompt.
And I'm going to say, don't forget that 30% rule. I can't remember. I'm sorry, was it 3rd or 4th grade? 4th grade. You got to go 30% behind. They're probably not going to be able to hold on to that information, even with Alexa. That's when you're coaching, right? Like, so we're going to be like, okay, Alexa said, get the book back. You're going to go with him, grabbing the book back. You're still training him.
And they're going to throw it, and you let them throw it, but you're like, of course you're upset because you have to stop doing whatever to get ready. And that makes sense to me as you are picking up their book bag and helping them get ready.
You're probably going to have to do it with them for quite some time, but pro tip, put all the stuff in the car, including the shoes. The night before, and then you can practice it without you freaking out that you're going to like never get to work ever, right? And then that allows them to feel that independence and confidence. And the other part, the visual timer, game changer for us. Like you have to see it or you have to have specific songs. Like my daughter showers to 3 songs, and when the certain song comes on, it's called Get Out or Mommy's Turning the Hot Water Off. Like as a joke, but not really.
And there's timers on Amazon. There's timers on Amazon that they can visually see when they're younger, like, you know, the 15 minutes. If they might not cognitively get what 15 minutes is, they can't feel it, and that's the time blindness is they don't feel it. It kind of like, and then the pie is like 15 minutes, so they see how much is left.
Yeah, I want to make sure we have time for other questions, but I just hope what you see is that if you're really struggling, going to someone who specializes just for a couple sessions yourself to get all these tips. I mean, I can tell, we shared this much with all of you tonight, and I hope you got a lot out of tonight. Was there another question?
I was just saying to chunk it more, the time. So
Chunk it, yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to get up time, you don't have to talk to them again till the alarm goes off, and then it's their shoe stop time, and then the alarm goes off, it's when the alarm goes off, it's time to go out.
Yeah, so you found how to use the alarm chunking it, so there's an alarm for every single thing. Yeah. Okay, what other, yes?
So my kids range from 22 to 10. And there are conversations that my 27-year-olds, have and talk about that I have protected my younger one from. Things such as big world events, political things that my 10-year-old does not have the skill to think through. She doesn't know, well, none of us know all the pieces. But now I'm wondering, is keeping her from those conversations a kind of accommodation, and now I'm just making her anxiety bigger, or?
Well, I think anytime there are secrets and we can talk about this and you can't hear it, then kids tend to create their own stories about what that's about. There is an interesting thing that you may not know, and that is we can give kids information, and if they're not developmentally ready to hear that information, they don't hear it. So then they're going to come back to you and they're going to be like, Mom, what are Republicans and Democrats? And you're like, well, literally, your big brother's been talking about that nonstop. But they weren't listening because they weren't ready for that information. So I think if they are in the house or in the room and they listen for part of it and then they go play for part of it, you can check in with them when they go to bed and say, hey, you heard a lot of stuff going on tonight. Do you have any questions about it? So you're just allowing them to be a part of that. I don't know what you guys would say.
Absolutely. An age-appropriate, like, kids' news week, right? I mean, sometimes
You can share things like that, and then it can be a conversation. The most important thing to do is to teach critical thinking and help them navigate that they can have a thought or a response and still be like kind or manage it or come to you and talk. We don't actually have to know all the answers.
Do you think that kids with ADHD should be kept in the same, because of the 30%, developmental issue? Do you think that they should be kept in the same age group with the rest of the kids and struggle their whole way through, or should we be doing something about that?
Chris and I are like, what do you mean kept with? Like, are we talking about class?
Expected to be like my kids, severe ADHD, expected to be with the mainstream kids, to do the mainstream things, but he's 30% behind.
Yeah, so
I mean, I've been saying, I feel like he should be with a grade down, lower, he's got friends, in lower classes, he relates to them better, and it's because developmentally, he's not 15.
I don't know about your son specifically, right? And none of us have ever met him. But generally speaking, we want to look at kids are so much more capable than what we necessarily realize most of the time. And like, if you take a 16-year-old and put them with 13-year-olds, typically when they are functioning in a number of different areas, that is going to do more harm than good. One of the key features of ADHD is that, so you have maybe these 7 different areas of executive functioning, right? Like, that doesn't mean that that you're behind 30% in all of them, right? So most people have strengths and limitations, and so it's really individualized, but the majority, it is not a developmental disability or an impairment that results typically in keeping one back related to like grade.
And it's 30% behind in those executive functions, not overall in every part of that.
So why don't we have a support, like we have on-school support? Why can't there be like a support system for kids with ADHD to provide support for executive functioning?
Well, I think we're out here trying to advocate and educate people so they do know. And I know we worked with some different teachers to help them understand. And I know when I have a client myself, I'll talk to that teacher and it will be like an individual so they do understand. Yeah.
Again, what you're talking about, like with ADHD and some of the other neurodivergent experiences that people have, they are so individualized. Like, technically speaking, some kids with ADHD are placed into emotional support classrooms. There's also a lot of people, where, again, I mean, unfortunately, the reality is the academic challenges that one is given or the opportunities that you're given when you're placed into an emotional support classroom are often limiting. And my experience has been, and we know, I mean, you know that, right? And part of that is because they're helping with behaviors and emotional things. So if your child really enjoys it, we can't do it across the board. It's got to be very individualized.
And it's not an intellectual thing, that's the hard part. I do know we're at 7:30, did you want to?
No, but I think the takeaway from today is that we can't expect systems to change for us. They're not going to. These are big systems. But we want to skill all of you up, and we want to skill up the children, and ideally we want to skill up the teachers that your children are with. And then as your children get older, then they start skilling up their friends. Hey, I've got anxiety, or I've got ADHD, or I feel really vulnerable in this way because of some things that have happened. I literally was just talking to a 70-year-old about, she had always kept it a secret but was getting angry. So the idea is, how do we skill up your kids and you so that you can advocate for what you need? That's, I think, our goal, because we can't change all the systems. Okay, on that note, I hope this was helpful to all of you. I hope that you encourage your friends and teachers to watch the video, and we'll be up here for a few minutes after if you have a question, but thank you very much for coming out here tonight.